The big fish are coming.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers, where just a reminder, we're going to be doing a mailbag a little bit later in the week. So we're going to get there. We got a whole bunch of bye week stuff we wanted to get to, and we're doing this today right after Jedd Fisch's press conference. And he said a lot of really interesting things about young players. So we're going to be focused on the future today. We're going to get into players that we're most excited about in 2025. We're going to talk about Jedd's comments on expanding the scholarship limit, which, as we know, is moving from 85 this season to 105 next year. But one of the first things that Jedd said was Washington still needs to keep adding talent. And yeah, that's part of college football. We get it. But the way he kind of phrased it was really interesting. And Lars, just what was your take on that whole matter?
Well, right away, I went and, kind of my initial thought was the first 5 or 6 guys thinking about in that class. Zaydrius, Dylan Robinson, all those guys, and most of the guys on defense kind of came to mind because I don't know if it was in that question or in a later question where Jedd was mentioning, Zoe, Carson, all the guys who are basically out of eligibility. Quietly did not mention D'Lo in that list. Worth noting, just kind of quietly noting on that. That's something I had talked to D'Angelo about when he committed. So I think they might have actually found that route. Whether or not they have to be determined. But again, you look at the class, the 2025 class of how it stands right now, that wave is coming. They already got the big fish. I know fans are going to say, well, they haven't signed yet. True. By the way, the amount of fans pointing out that Washington has a 5-star kicker coming in really want to check the classification on which class he's in.
Yeah, 2026 is
like real quick.
Yeah.
Just FYI. No, but either way, but it speaks to, especially on defense, when you're losing so many guys, having all those 4 stars already secured, like that wave is coming. Those guys, we've talked about it throughout the summer. Dylan Robinson, those guys are all going to be playing one side or another right away.
No, you're absolutely right. I know that there's also some so they're talking about Tyler Presson, the kid from Carlsbad, who listed as both a kicker and a punter. So I think that might be where some of that discourse is coming from as well. But Lars, I absolutely agree with you. Where that was the first thing that I said. Where for anybody who isn't completely aware of some of the NCAA rules and regulations around recruiting, Jedd is not allowed to mention any of these players by name until they sign. So if Captain Obvious over here, you're welcome. But if you didn't, that's why he has to take this route that he did, where, he got into talking about all these different position groups, talking about, Cam Broussard and Cameron Fabiculano are out of eligibility. So, safety and, linebacker without Tupatala and Carson Bruner, defensive line, offensive line, wide receiver, this and that, where he's going through all these different positions and saying, we need help here. We're looking for an influx of talent. One thing that I'm really intrigued by is just where they're going to go in the portal from here. And I really don't enjoy talking about it 7 games into the season, but it's something I wrote about a little bit over on Huskies Wire, and something that the more you go back and watch some of these games, win or lose, you see the vision of what Jedd wants to do. You see the vision with his younger players, with the guys he talked about today, Kamori House, Peyton Waters, Adam Mohammed, Damon Williams, Audric Harris, Rasheed Williams, all these guys that he mentioned, just saying, hey, this is certainly, these are guys who have played for us. This is what we see for the future. So seeing all that, you see what the vision is, but it also still needs to be supplemented by some of these veteran guys, where I have a very strong feeling they're going to go out and try to add another tackle in the portal. I call it a hunch, probably a wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if they go that route. Maybe another safety or a linebacker, just some of these other veteran guys that you can, in this same route of what Cameron Broussard is and what some of these other guys are, just 1 year stopgaps where it's all right. We still have a lot of young players in the room and we're going to give them a lot of reps, but we want one other guy in the room to help get them there. Like Lars, just in the same vein that you're mentioning there, Chris Lawson, Raiden Vinesbright, Deji Jose at receiver, where it's the same thing. Vanderplu, Baron Naone at tight end. It's the same thing where there's a lot of talent coming in, and you're really excited about that. And you can't help but look forward to that. I know that's just always part of college football and something, but at the same thing, it doesn't help Washington now, but it just all lends to it's going in the right direction.
I agree, although I do think I might push back on the tackle and say it might be a guard, because actually, if you think about it, both tackles have eligibility coming back. Max has at least one more year. Drew has, I believe, 2 at minimum. But you look at Enoch, D'Lo, if he ends up not coming back, you do have Landon and guard, and they like Zach Henning and all this. So I think I would probably just say one offensive lineman, and you kind of pick and choose where that ends up being. If it ends up being a tackle, so be it. But I think, the ironic part about all of this, and in a way we'll kind of dive more deeper into it in the third segment, but it's all the young players that you still have on the roster, like Swane, right? All these redshirt freshmen and true freshmen. It's like, well, you're going to be adding freshmen to that mix, so now you're almost like backlogging everything for the future, which works because you do have 2 tackles, but it's also why you're taking 2 quarterbacks, you're taking a running back. So does Jonah Coleman come back? There's so many other things to kind of look back, and so you can see the foundation of what Jedd's building and what Steve Belichick is building on defense, and you can just say, yeah, had a couple plays here, a couple plays there would have been different. Maybe you're looking at 6-1, maybe you're looking at 5-2 versus 4-3, and so everything is trending in the right direction. The only frustrating part about this conversation is theoretically, I'm going to take the devil's advocate argument here for just a real quick second, could also fall apart. You could, again, I'm not, no speculation.
Sure.
Because they haven't signed yet, you can't pencil in certain guys. I would expect most of the staff, most of these guys to stick. This class, and I remember asking Jonah about this at Big Ten Media Day, about that 22 or 23 class, whichever one all those guys came in, McMillan,
22,
Coleman, off the 1 in 11 year. He's like, well, no, we just really kind of sense like building it together, building it tight-knit. And in a way, kind of seems like this year is that bridge to that, because you're bringing in 50 plus guys. Well, not all of them are going to be coming back, Cam Brassard, X, Y, and Z. So you kind of have to, it's like Battleship. You're going to miss a few shots here and there, but your second go around in 25 is a lot different. So we see the wave is coming, and I think it's a significant point worth noting. All those commits came in the summer. So aside from Tuskowski and a couple of others, but you really like that the core of that class was built in June and July, May, June, July, so that you're not saying, hey, we're taking these guys in the season, hoping that we'll hold on to them. It really seems like, okay, if you're going to commit like Tuskowski, if you're going to flip from Minnesota to Washington, could you flip again? Sure. Oregon has offered, same with Vander, all those sort of things. But kids also see, well, wait, why didn't you offer me a couple months ago?
Sure.
Again, you could have offered and said, hey, like, can't really take you right now, but we like you. We have to take you if things fall a certain way. But, one school recruits a certain way, one school doesn't. So I think Jedd's building it the right way.
I agree with you there. And that's that exactly right there. That last point is why we wanted to have this conversation, because it's being built up in a way that you can be happy about, you can look forward to and be excited about. Does that help right now? No, absolutely not. But it's something where, you can think about it and say, all right, still in the same position, but you can look at this recruiting class and say, hey, it's in, the mid 30s, like the 23 class was for a majority of that time with Kalen DeBoer, where it's like, all right, like, yeah, that, and of course, much different scenario, much different case there. But it's, if you combine that number, that ranking with, what is going on the field this season, this is a very different conversation that we're having. But because that one of the reasons that Jedd was brought here was to recruit, was to do all these things, he's following through on that aspect. And that's the thing that is frustrating about this, is coming off the national championship. Fans didn't want to see that. You wanted to just say, okay, go, go, go. And the frustrating thing is it all should combine, and they should be, 6-1, but we can't talk about it like that because that's not where they are. You have to look at it for the reality of the situation of there are building blocks here, and the long-term is really exciting. And part of the long-term is, figuring out what to do with these new scholarship rules. And Jedd talked about it a little bit. Let's dive into that. Hey, Locked On Huskies fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we pulled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, we're supporting Voy Tanufi. We just pitched in $100, and we'd love for you to join us. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Voy Tanufi the love and keep him connected to the school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets up your team for success. Plus, don't miss Roy's exciting giveaway with 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Already on Roy, and any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. So Lars, expanding to 105 scholarships is something we've talked about on the show a little bit previously, but you asked Jedd Fisch about that on Monday at his press conference. And I actually liked his answer, where he said, yeah, we're obviously going to keep an eye out on what other schools are doing, but I want to make sure the walk-on program stays in place because that's really valuable. That's really important to a team. And with 85 players on scholarship, it can maximize the revenue sharing. It can maximize some of these other things to, we talked about Roy, shout out. It maximizes some of those earning potentials for guys on the roster. And as he said, we saw 2 $20 million rosters going at it on the field in Ohio State and Oregon. And things like that give us the ability to level the playing field and to compete.
Yeah, that was a DA comment by Jedd, and I loved it because it was, it's like what I said after the game, where it's like, I know Washington fans aren't going to like hearing it, but that was a slugfest. That was an NFL game at Autzen, and now Washington at the end of the season is going to experience that. And that's, I think, when you're going to see where exactly because Washington was behind, but they weren't UCLA behind. And I think the USC game might actually be the best barometer of this because I think they could actually beat USC as well. We've seen Lincoln some people think he's already checked out and all that. But it's why I asked the question, because when you look at this 25 class, okay, how many other guys are you building? How many are you losing? And the other thing to keep in mind is walk-ons can still earn NIL. So they can still have a deal with Motley Futures. So I think that also plays into a part of this where you can use the revenue stream for the 85. And Motley Futures becomes more some of the other guys on the revenue, they're getting less of the revenue, but we'll kind of match it on the back end here. So there's a way to pair it to where because you don't want to have a roster with, let's say, 3 $5 million players, 10 $1 million players, and then a bunch of 50Ks. You want to have a roster that's, hey, I can see that this is attainable without having to be like ungodly. Like if I'm Dash Beerley, do I have to be Michael Penix to get paid, or can I see like a Damon, right, where it's like a staggered progression of like, hey, as long as you continue to build up, you will get more resources allotted to you. And I think that's exactly how it should be. Again, I know NIL ain't paying for play, but it's also paying for play. So, it is what it is. You can call a spade because Washington can still operate in this. And I was glad that Jedd touched on it, where when he talked to Pat and talked to, I believe he was referring to Aaron Knotts, the chief of staff. He said Aaron, which I'm assuming could also have been Aaron O'Connell, but I'm going to.
I thought it was Aaron O'Connell, yeah.
So I think the way he said it, I'm going to hedge my bet and say Aaron Knotts because he's the chief of staff of football, and he works pretty closely with Pat, and Jedd and him have a good relationship. So I'm just going to bet on that. But either way, it's the admin telling Jedd, hey, look, we're here for you. We're not going to go completely left or right of center, but we're willing to see what we can do. And, let's say, 3/4 of the Big Ten, excluding Ohio State and Oregon, you just take out kind of the top 2, cherry pick Georgia, Alabama, take them out of the SEC. What is the rest of the league looking like? That, I think, is where UW and Jedd are going to be looking, saying, okay, well, are most schools going to 90, 95? They're keeping it at 85. How much could we give up? Maybe $500,000 in revenue share, because Jedd said $2.5 million would basically be taken off if you add up to 105. I'm assuming that number was going up to 105, was where that 2.5 was coming from, because I have to imagine there would be like a staggered progression. Like, well, what if you go to 90 scholarships? And I think that's kind of where this gray area lies of Do you give partial scholarships? But that's where Motley Futures and where all of it comes into play. So, when fans think, well, wait, I've been giving to Motley Futures. Why would I give money to Motley Futures when UW is going to go off revenue stream? You still want the best resources possible for your program. So the fact you can still use both. And there's no shame in that because, again, if you want to be Ohio State and Oregon, I guarantee you that's what they're doing. Ohio State ain't just going to say, yeah, we'll just take our revenue and call it even. No, they are going to use every avenue possible. Same thing with Oregon. And if you're Washington, you have no excuse but to do the same because the resources are there.
So I certainly agree with all that. I thought about this in a very different way, just because nothing you said is wrong. I love your whole thought process there. I'm just really curious to see how this is all going to get managed, because there are so many bigger issues at play that we don't, necessarily feel are worth covering at this time, because it's not necessarily just, things that we can talk about and say, yes, this or that, or because, you think about the settlement in April, all those sort of things that are coming. That's, way over our heads in terms of what it means necessarily for Washington at this point in time. But what we can control, what we can look at, is how it affects the guys on the roster. And that's why I say I think Jedd made a whole bunch of good points with what he was saying, because staying around 85, maybe going a little bit over that. I have a feeling it'll be, maybe a little closer to 90. Just, you look at this recruiting class, you look at how big it is in terms of guys that we know are on scholarship. If some of the specialists end up being on a half scholarship or something like that, I wouldn't end up being surprised. But you can look at all that and say, okay, we still want to make sure we get as much of this talent as we possibly can in the building. And then we kind of go from there and figure it out. Where with, just the way that money can be distributed once you get in the door with something like, an NIL collective or third parties that want to get involved or anything like that. There are so many different ways that this could fall. And I think that we really have only reached the tip of the iceberg here, and it opens just so many cans of worms that who knows where this is really going to go.
Right. And I mean, it was kind of almost the theme of the back end of the press conference, and almost to an extent, the entire press conference, where it's like, hey, look, we had a bunch of unknowns coming into the season. We tried our best. And by the way, we're 4-3. So it's not like we're 1-6 or something like that, where it's not like, oh, wow, like, Jedd, you brought all these guys in and they were terrible. So you see where it's going. But at the same point, there's so many unknowns where, again, like you said, we're not going to touch on it because it'd be out of pocket to say so for various reasons. Because, again, if we're talking about high school kids getting scholarships, not our place to decide that. That's on the UW coaches. And I think, honestly, they don't know. I truly think they don't
I agree. Yeah.
Fully know what that's going to look like. And so Jedd, credit to him, gave probably the best and honest answer that he could in the moment, while still acknowledging, like, what is our actual plan? Well, let's just say we'll say at 85, because right now they're actually at 84. So Jedd's under the already scholarship limit. So I guess, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Jedd. And I think it's kind of, I wonder if the thought process comes down to attracting better talent, where you can necessarily say, hey, we'll add, instead of, this is going to sound bad, watering down the roster. If you expanded to 105 and you added all those scholarship guys, but let's be real, not all those guys are scholarship worthy, you're now basically burning money. UW is not in a position to do that. And that's no disrespect. There's no kids mentioned. You can pick it.
That's a good point.
Media corps could say, hey, we're representing that mix. We're carrying the dead weight there.
No, that's a really good point, where you can look at that and just say, all of a sudden, where guys that were preferred walk-ons, now it's all right. Well, I'm looking at taking a half scholarship here. Why would I want to walk on there? No, I just wanted to add that in. And I see exactly what you mean.
And so once you get an idea of, okay, can we get, it's almost, I'm trying to not mention names here. You look at certain positions where it's like, hey, can you load up here and then maybe take a couple extra walk-ons? I mean, they added that walk-on D lineman like halfway through fall camp. So
nice, Davis, yeah.
Right. So you can clearly see this. It's like an NFL team. It truly is. They're always roster managing. There's always some level of, hey, we're looking at this guy, Brian Parham going out, so-and-so going out, other people potentially coming in, guys quietly going out that maybe just for different reasons won't be a part of the team next year. I'm not going to name names again, but just certain guys that I think we both talked about for one reason or another could not be here next year. All of those are still unknown at this point in time. So you're basically kind of hands are tied behind your back. But with that being said, Jedd's basically got him in the position that he needs him to, where look, if you want to add more, you can. You don't need to run guys off. And I think that's why the class where it sits right now is perfect, because the size kind of lines up.
So with that being said, Lars, let's get into the class. Let's just talk about guys that we're really excited about next season. Right after message from our friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, and there's so much fun stuff going on FanDuel. I wanted to come on here and say, all right, Lions, Super Bowl, going to win the NFC, lock that in. The Aiden Hutchinson injury, that was a little tough. We wanted to make the Lions the official team of Locked On Huskies again, but I like the Bears. I think that the Bears are really coming together after that win over the Jags in London. Looks like Caleb Williams finally has his timing down. He's really in sync with Keenan Allen. We know Roma Dunze is in the mix, and they got DJ Moore, who didn't have the best days, but their odds to win the NFC North over on FanDuel right now, they are absolutely fantastic. You should go check those out, and so many more. So, Lars, before we get into players you're excited about for 2025, I have a question for you. How did you think about this question? Did you think about it in terms of recruits, players on the roster, or a little bit of both?
I thought it was players on the roster, but the way that it kind of phrased at
the
end,
that's great.
But the way you phrased it going into the ad read, it kind of is 2 and 1, because the guys are definitely Jedd said they'll be here in December, which I'm not sure how much of this class will be. I know there's I want to say at least a baker's dozen, half dozen to a baker's dozen, somewhere in that ballpark that might be here by the time spring ball comes around in March. So there, you could work on it that way. But I think either way, let's start with the guys on the roster. Let's start
because I started with the recruits. That's why I asked. I had way more on that side. So no, go with guys on the roster. Yeah. And then we'll flip flop. I like that.
Okay. So let's start with our favorite and the most obvious, Damon Williams and Adam Mohammed. Yeah. I'm going to tie those two together because really they're kind of in lockstep. So for me, everything that we've seen from we're going to be brief from this because we talked about Damon so much. We talked about him a lot on yesterday's show as well. But that is really the cornerstone of this offense. So when we're talking about expanding rosters, building, doing all this and that, recruiting Raiden Weinsbreit, Chris, all these guys, Damon has, and one thing Dash, I don't know if he said it on our podcast or if he was to me, but he went up there for that camp, that elite camp or whatever it was, not UW's camp, but the Under Armour one. And he was like, yeah, no, I went in the room and it was Will. It was, I forgot who else was in there on campus because Shea wasn't there at that point. But basically it was like, hey, look, Dash is talking about Damon and basically how Damon is so involved in helping everything kind of get to the next level while not usurping Will. So I think that's what really makes it exciting is because Damon is going to benefit so much from, it's not being humble, but it's almost just kind of like, when you're running and you're doing a workout and you have the weights behind you and you're kind of running, but then when you take those weights off, you're flying. That's going to be Damon next year. And that's the same thing with Adam Mohammed.
I like that comp. That's a good one. So I'll flip it around here since I thought about this from the recruit angle and I'm cheating a little bit. You tied two guys together. I'm going to tie two guys together. Two that I truly believe can start next season. Or at the very least are going to do exactly what Demond and Adam and Kamari House and a lot of these other guys are doing and play in every game. And that's Zaydrius, Rainey-Sale, and Dylan Robinson. When I look at both those guys, I see physically ready to play. I see ideal body type for the Big Ten. Because one thing I asked Jedd that I wrote about a little bit over on Huskies Wire is one thing I asked Jedd was, what did you learn from your two Big Ten losses, especially Iowa? What did you take away from those games? And the first thing he said was, yeah, those guys are big, which, I mean, it's a cliche answer, but it's a different form of big than, you might be used to when you're playing in the Pac-10, Pac-12, like the old Vita Vea where, yeah, he made big people look not so big. That's what all of Iowa's offensive line is, and Michigan and Ohio State and all these teams. That's one thing that Washington needs to improve on. And when you look at Zaydrius, Rainey-Sale and you look at Dylan Robinson, those are things you say, oh yeah, no, those dudes are, especially for their position, are absolutely massive. And you look at their athleticism, you look at all the tools that they have right now. Those are guys that I believe, especially if they're among that group that are able to come in for spring ball and work out and get here early, that they're going to be a massive part of this rotation. So those are two guys that I look at and I just say, yes, those are going to be players next year, whether people who are, anti-playing freshmen or for playing freshmen, those are ones, and whether you like that or not, those two guys are going to be on the field.
Oh yeah, no, there's zero. I mean, I would probably add. I think Epperson will probably see the field a decent amount, almost in the Peyton Waters mold. Probably start more so in special teams, work his way up into that second string of rotation of the safety and nickel for that matter. Because again, you got to kind of compare some of these positions where your dad's out of eligibility, Barkins could be, so you're going to have a lot of corner depth that needs to rise up. But one thing that Jedd also kind of paired together with all of this that I think kind of ties perfectly back, not perfectly, but we're going to make it work anyways. The guys that are already on the roster in 24 have a head start above everybody. But that's kind of why I wanted to lead with Damon and Adam, and on defense, Kamori House, Peyton Waters, those type of guys where you look and say, okay, Kamori had a great start against the Wazoo in the Apple Cup. He's played a lot this season. Linus Davis, my word, I not Vita, but he's going to have a significant impact. And you also have, Elijah and some other guys that are juniors that can come back, I believe. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts to this. So when you look at the safety position, like, Dylan Robinson's going to play. My question is which side of the ball? The one that intrigues me the most, the ones that intrigues me the most, I agree, but is the receivers, the other position, Dylan Robinson.
Yes.
That's where I want to go with this, because when I look at this, and I don't know how, we might have to have a conversation later on this week about when we talk about transfer portal and the whole conversation we had about do you ditch Will for Damon and what message does that send? What message are we getting from Jeremiah Hunter? Like, I know Jedd said that they tried to target him, but it's like, if I'm an NFL bodied receiver trying to have 1 year left and I think I might have better quarterback play and I only get 3 targets, I kind of it's a head scratcher to me. And so now Audric, I know, got a lot of snaps, and Rashid got his first career touchdown reception. Perfect timing when I got to the field on that one. But because it was actually the second try at it. Which I didn't even realize at the time. But you have all those pieces, but Deji's going to push for playing time. Rain Weinbright is going to push for playing time. Chris Lawson also could be the reverse Dylan Robinson. He could be that guy that ends up as on defense, but he's going to start out a receiver. So there's so many variables in this class. The key, the talent that's coming in. If we put a talent acquisition on the first wave of Fisch, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, fair combined between portal, maybe 7.5, with Jonah, Damon, all those good. Long term, maybe 8. The class coming in is already an 8.5. So I think when you're talking about those guys, once they get on campus, and if Dylan Robinson can enroll early, I know Dash is. I don't know if Tristan Keeney McMillan is, but all those positions of development, getting around the players, and then when you're recruiting 26, 27, 28, those guys being on campus instead of being in high school, it just becomes a pro operation. That's exactly what the only frustrating part is this year and building through it. That is the hardest part, especially coming off a national championship. But I will say, I think, Jedd deserves a lot of credit for what he's gotten Washington to and where they're heading.
I certainly agree with you there. So I'm really glad you brought up the receivers, because I did want to get there. I feel like you need to throw Vanderploeg and Baron into that mix as well, just in terms of pass catchers in total, because those guys are also going to play very early. Because I want to talk about the receivers that are on the roster, where I want to talk about Rashid. I want to talk about Audric Harris, Jason Robinson, where I've heard great things about all those guys. Obviously, we've seen more of the prior to on the field, but you look at that group of guys and you can combine them with the players that are coming in. And all of a sudden, what right now might look like and Keith Reynolds as well, where you look at what might look like a shallow group of receivers, because, you see Denzel and Giles getting the majority of the numbers, making the majority of the plays there. But you still look at Jeremiah, where I certainly agree with you, Lars, that Jeremiah deserves more, but it goes back to what Jake Butt said on our show a couple of weeks ago, where he said, there's only so much that can go around. There's only one football, where I don't agree with the way it's been distributed in terms of leaving it away from Jeremiah, but I hear his point. So I get it. And I'm willing to, in some senses, chalk it up to that. But we look at what this talent group can be next year and in 2026 and moving forward, you look at it and you just say, okay, it might not be what 2023 was, but it's closer than people think, where, Denzel is a guy that I think he ends up coming back. where the numbers he has this season are awesome, but he could make another significant jump forward in 2025. And then you pair that with a lot of these guys where, if you want to throw Keith Reynolds into that Giles Jackson role, however you want to move these guys around, there's so much talent there. And there's so much to be excited about for DeMond. And because all of a sudden, some of these guys that are working with him on scout team, you can put them up with the first team, with the second team when DeMond is out there. And it's okay. Yeah. All that chemistry is there. And this is what we were building towards. It was all coming to this. And with all those guys, I'm so excited to see what's next.
The only thing I can add, because there's nothing that I can add more to that offensive point, the one player that I'm honestly most excited for to answer this question specifically, Jayvon Parker.
Yes.
He's
got to get healthy.
That's a quiet. No, but that's
right.
For that reason. Because again, a healthy Jayvon and maybe even a healthy Armand, the depth could look totally different, and we're not even thinking of that right now. Because again, you can't, because hey, well, he's still in the rehab process. You can't even think about it. But if he comes back healthy, which we expect him to, as I expect him to, I'm sure you do too. But that alone, that's basically a transfer portal addition right there. Not in the true sense of the word, but it's like, and same thing with Kevin Green. I think Kevin Green could be that guy as well in the slot next year, where maybe in an offseason get fully healthy. Because again, he looked really good at fall camp.
Absolutely.
Unfortunate injury happened. So I think all that depth is there. We just, the timing is working against Jedd this season.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy, Craig Sheeman, puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube, wherever else you listen to your podcast. And if you enjoy everything we have to offer, we just passed 3,000 subscribers, and we are so grateful to each and every one of you for that. It means so much to us. We've been doing the show for just a little over a year. Yeah, Lars, it's awesome to be at this point, and we truly could not be more thankful to each and every single person that's ever tuned into a show, that's left a comment, all of that sort of stuff. It means so much to us, and we're so grateful for all that. And we can't wait to keep building and see what's next. And if you want to be part of that, because we got so much more fun stuff coming every single day, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Yeah, any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.